Chapter 11. Elizabeth, it's your turn. Come on up. I looked up at David. He was above me in the branches of the tree. I heard the words. I understood what he meant, but I just couldn't make my body move. Come on, hurry up, he yelled. I stayed frozen in place. I just wanted to be left alone. I kept my eyes closed. I didn't want to open them. I was too tired, too bone-numbingly cold. I didn't know how much longer I could last. Maybe I could just keep my eyes closed. I could go to sleep, get away from everything, and when I woke up, I would... There was a hand shaking my shoulder roughly. My eyes popped open. David had climbed down and was in the water beside me. You have to get up into the tree. It's your turn, he said. We'd taken shifts, 5 minutes, or what we thought was 5 minutes, in the tree, and then 5 minutes in the water, back and forth. We'd already traded 4 times. No, 5 times. How much longer could we do this? Not for hours. Not for another 5 minutes. I was finished. I was just going to stay where I was and go back to sleep. I closed my eyes again. David grabbed one of my hands and yanked it from the grip I had on the branch. He reached my arm up to another spot. Take hold and climb up, he yelled. I tried to lift my leg. I couldn't feel anything. Couldn't feel my foot or my leg. It just felt heavy, tremendously heavy, as if it were made of lead. I couldn't lift it. I can't do it, I whimpered. I can't. Elizabeth, David said softly, you have to go on. I can't. You have to. We need you. Susie needs you. Just go up and see her. Just try. Susie was in the branches over my head. She had her feet on the one solid branch, and she was tied in place with what remained of David's broken belt. Just go and talk to Susie, he urged me. Let her know we are going to make it. We are? I whispered. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. How could I? I wanted to give up, close my eyes, let go of the branches, and just be taken away. We are going to make it, he yelled, and I was jolted awake again. Now, go and tell Susie. Go up there. She needs you. I couldn't give up. Even if I didn't believe it, I had to keep trying. Susie needed that. I dragged my leg up and thumped my foot into a crook, pushing myself up. I did the same with my other foot, and now I was almost out of the water. I should have felt warmer, but I didn't. The air was cold, and I started to shake all over. Susie, I called out, how are you doing? She didn't answer. Susie? I'm so cold, she whispered through chattering teeth. So cold. You have to keep moving. Move your feet. You have to keep the blood flowing. I wrapped both my legs and arms around the thin tree trunk. Anchored in place, my hands were free. I reached over and started to rub Susie's legs. It hurts, she cried. Then you do it. Both of you shut up, David yelled. Listen. Listen for what? All I could hear was the constant rumble of the water as it streamed past us. Then, like a mirage, a little boat shot by, its motor whining, heading upstream. In it were 2 figures, 2 men. One was holding a big light illuminating the way. Hey, we're here! Help! Help! I yelled, but the boat and light went wide of us. It had passed so close, but they hadn't seen us. I felt crushed. For a few brief seconds, I had thought that maybe we were going to be helped, and then the little boat started to turn, a little half circle across the river, and then it was heading right back, not toward us, but downstream. I started to scream and wave an arm, and David yelled, and the boat jerked over to the side and came right at us. The noise of the motor got louder and louder and then slowed down. The man at the front of the boat stood up, reached out, and grabbed hold of the branches. His hand was only a few feet from where I was holding on. I looked him straight in the eye, but I couldn't allow myself to believe that it was real, that he was real. This gigantic man was standing there, staring at me, and then he smiled, a gigantic smile. The beam of the flashlight came up and bathed me in light. Hold her steady, Herb, he yelled over his shoulder. Hold the boat steady. The beam of the flashlight bounced, and then moved away from me. He dropped the light to his feet. Still holding onto the branches with one hand, he bent down, reached forward into the water, grabbed David by the arm, and pulled him up and out. He threw him into the boat like he had just landed a fish. The little boat swung around as though it was trying to get free, but he held his grip, not letting it escape. You next, he yelled at me. I started to go and stopped. No, her first. Her first. I pointed at Susie. He looked up and his eyes widened. He obviously hadn't seen Susie up in the branches above my head. All at once, the whole world seemed to tilt to the side. The branches that were supporting me were pulled down, Susie along with them. What was happening? Was the tree breaking? Were we going to be swept away at the last instant, just seconds before we were about to be saved? And then I realized what was going on. The man was standing up in the boat, and he was pulling the branches down, pulling Susie and me toward him. Lower and lower. Then, with his bare hands, he just snapped the branches off, and Susie, and part of the tree, dropped into his arms. He lowered her into the boat, setting her down on the bottom beside David. "Your turn," he called out. I understood the words, but for a few seconds they didn't make any sense. Yes, I'm coming. I released my grip on the branches and practically fell into the boat. The man caught me to soften the blow. "Anybody else in that tree that I need to know about?" he asked. "Just us." "Get her moving, Herb," he yelled. "You kids stay in the bottom. This is going to be a rocky ride." He let go of the branches, and the motor roared as he gunned it and took us away from the trees. "I'm Jim," he said, "and the guy back there is Herb. I'm Elizabeth Hardy, and these are David and Susie McBride." "How did you know where we were?" David asked. "Did somebody on shore see us?" "Nope. I just caught sight of something in the tree as we passed by, so I swung around to take another look," Herb explained. "We've been out all night," Jim said. "This has to be our 10th or 11th trip. We found somebody every time." "How long have you three been in that tree?" "It seemed like forever," I said softly. "Forever in a horrible dream." The boat cut sharply in one direction so that I was tossed to the side, and I bounced along the bottom. "Sorry about that," Herb said. "Telephone pole. I hate those telephone poles." "He has to keep cutting around things," Jim yelled out over the sound of the motor. "If we get hit by one of those poles, the boat will be smashed to pieces." "Darn poles are worse than the trees. They keep swishing by, passing like toothpicks." "Not that anything's going to happen," Jim said. "Herb here is a master at the helm of a boat. Nothing to worry about." "Just hang on tight," Herb said. "We'll have you to shore in just a minute." I reached out and took Susie's hand in one hand. I took David's in the other. They were huddled together on the bottom of the boat. I held them tight. I wasn't letting go. I turned my head ever so slightly so I could see where we were going. From that angle, sitting at the bottom of the boat, I couldn't see the water anymore. All I could see was Jim, perched in the bow, a small spotlight in his hands, lighting our route. Off to the side were the lights on the shore, little dancing lights, which were getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then, the motor got quieter, and I could feel the boat slow down. "3 more," Jim yelled out. 3 kids. Jim jumped out, and we were surrounded by people. Hands helped pull me to my feet and out of the boat. I was standing in knee-deep water. A blanket was wrapped around my shoulders, and there were voices, so many voices cheering and talking that I couldn't hear any of them. David was helped to his feet, and somebody picked Susie up, wrapped a blanket around her, and started to walk away with her. "Elizabeth," she yelled. She began sobbing and screaming and struggling to get away from the man holding her. I broke free and ran, practically tripping and falling over my frozen feet. "Here, give her to me," I demanded. "It's all right," the man said. "I've got her." "No, give her to Elizabeth." It was David. He was at my side. Reluctantly, the man let me take her. Susie stopped crying and wrapped her arms around me. David put an arm around my shoulders to help support me and Susie. I felt like laughing. I felt like crying. I felt like dropping to my knees and kissing the ground. Those 2 men had saved our lives, and I hadn't even thanked them. I turned around just in time to see Jim push the boat off, and he and Herb headed back out onto the river. I knew they'd been out many times already, but seeing them leave the safety of the land to go back out terrified me. I wanted to run back, not just to thank them, but to tell them not to go, that they had to stay here, that they couldn't go. But then, I thought, what if somebody before us had convinced them not to go out again? What would have happened to us? What would happen to any people who were still stranded? I knew that they couldn't stop until they were sure there was nobody else out there. I watched the boat spin around and turn back up the river. I watched until I could only see the spotlight plowing through the water, not the boat or the brave men in it. "Can somebody drive us to my house?" I asked. "I have to get home. I have to let my parents and the McBrides know that we're alive." Alive. We were alive. Sure, kid, no problem. You three can come with me. It was a policeman. He started to lead us away. I staggered, and his hand steadied me before I could fall or drop Susie. How about if I take her, he offered. I can walk, Susie said. I put her down, but kept her hand in mine. I wasn't letting go. He led us to his police car and opened the back door. We all climbed in. The seat was soft and dry. It felt as unreal as being out on the river. He started the engine, and we began to drive. I bet you three have quite the story to tell, he said. I guess so. But we always knew we were going to make it, David said. He looked over at me. We were safe as houses.